want to see what here in this conversation today really resonated with you. Did you learn something new and something that excited you? Then we want to try to hear from everybody, okay, where do you see an opportunity to move your institution in this direction? And where do you have concerns that there are barriers and challenges to get you there? Because Janice very strategically filled this room with a lot of different people. Lucy talked a lot about how it takes a system. What was your term, an engaged system?
Yeah.
It takes an engaged system. I want to, before we start answering questions, get folks to tell me where they're from. Can you raise your hand if you're coming from a university or a hospital? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you're from local government or the public sector? Okay. If you're from the community development sector, community or economic development, and if you're from, I consider the urban league, yeah, okay. And then banks and philanthropy. All right, so we have funders here, we have intermediaries here, we have the actual anchors here, and then we have government to think about policy. Recognize that you have support in this room to do a lot of new and inventive things. And the last thing I'll say before I make everyone else talk is, Ted, you mentioned that in New Mexico, was it? People were sitting in the room who were competitors with one another. I imagine a number of the institutions in this room are competitors with one another.
No.
Todd is from Miami. He knows this place way too well. So he is a local boy, even if he is up in Atlanta now with us. I'm hoping that even though some people in this room are competitors, they are able to, we can have a frank conversation. I want us to have a really frank conversation. So I'm hoping we can put down our walls, put down our nervousness about sharing our business secrets, and just have an open conversation, because at the end of the day, all of you live here and your institutions are based here. So I'm going to start us off by just asking what resonated with you, from Ned's conversation to Ted's to Lucy's. What resonated with you? What surprised you?
And we want to get as many people in as possible.
Yes.
So if you could just say your name and organization, and just maybe a sentence or two about what excited you about today. We can call on people too.
I'll start. Hi everyone. My name is Peter Nayamura. I'm with Broward Health, Executive VP of HR. And it's interesting, Jasmine actually, Senior VP, invited me out to this event, and I'm just so impressed, right? So I go to a lot of meetings, and most of the time, this has to be probably the most compelling meeting I've seen in about a year.
Can I just get that?
Right. I'm serious. So here's the thing, right? So what excited me was the fact that it's so tangible, it's so useful, it's so helpful, it's so, it made business sense. I know Ted spoke about that, So, and I agree. When you go back into your environment, most people are not going to say, yeah, this is what we want to do just because we have money to give to it. But when you're thinking about it from a business sort of perspective, then it makes sense, We all want to help people in different ways, I come from a background where I was actually almost a refugee in this country. So I know how that feels, and I feel for individuals, here it is we think, as I was actually a student of Dr. Murray there at FIU in the public administration, great, absolutely intriguing when you see the data and you see that really poverty, as much as it is, we talk about employment levels at the lowest levels of unemployment, and still in the worst neighborhoods, it's even worse, So it's, we have to find a way to kind of bridge this gap, and especially being in charge of HR, I feel a sense of responsibility that I'm going to leave here with to do something,
Yes.
So there's a sense of great need and also great opportunity with this business frame.
So I'm Pilar Guzman from the Empanadas, on the video. It's really exciting. I guess I'm the only business person, outside the community here. Two very practical things that come to mind, and we talk about this with Ines and Janice, is from the small business perspective. Working with anchor institutions it's really hard to understand processes. So making processes a little bit easier to understand. You really need to master, like working with the airport is one process, working with FIU, with So processes will be one thing. And then I think the other piece, that I will bring to the table is communication. How do you get the opportunities in front of the business or the small business community or the low-income small business community? Because you tend to see that the same businesses work in the same organization. So maybe broader, making it more diverse. It's making sense.
Here, here, and there.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Mejia, and a disclaimer, I can't hear. I landed last night, so I don't know if I'm screaming or not screaming. So you guys help me here. So first of all, very exciting, and I want to thank Janice. I know that she's been living and breathing this for a long time to get us all together. The opportunity that I see is that at West Kendall Baptist, we were actually just chosen this year as one of 5 communities to test using the Baldrige system to elevate communities. And the 4 drivers are economic impact, education attainment, safety, and quality of life. So that's where I see the opportunity of using anchor institution under all of those actually. And I know that you talked about safety a minute ago. I guess my concern is when I hear all in. Because if it's all in at once, that's difficult. But if we're able to test one part versus another, I think it'll make it easier for some of the large organizations.
Daniel Gibson with Allegheny Franciscan Ministries, a local foundation, and being maybe the last person invited to this, like just a couple days ago. Yeah, I just learned
How
about.
many calls did you get?
I got one crazy call, and they're really nice people. But I had no idea this conversation was going on. And so my big aha and big takeaway is that the sheer number of people in this room, I've been researching anchor institutions personally around ex-offender strategies up in Palm Beach County for the past few years, but I had no idea that this number of people were interested. No one's running out the room when we had this conversation, and I'm just really excited for what's next, and hopefully I'm on the list now.
All funders are on the list.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pam Hollingsworth. I'm from the Early Learning Coalition, Miami-Dade Monroe, and we are mission-focused in the Birth to 5 space. And so I'm very excited about being part of a community conversation that focuses from cradle to career, which one of our speakers mentioned very explicitly. I see an opportunity just for continued partnership, especially for an agency like mine, which is an anchor institution, perhaps a fledgling anchor institution that is very used to staying in its lane. So I look forward to continued collaboration. I'd like to extend a question that I didn't have an opportunity to ask earlier. What are we seeing on the national level in terms of institutions like mine, anchor institutions that are focused in birth to 5? What role are they traditionally playing in the community? And what are some of the opportunities for partnership that I may not be aware of at this point?
Let's put a parking lot for questions so that at the end we can make sure we're addressing those. I want to see if I can get 2 anchors in the room to stand up and tell me what's resonating. A hospital or a university or...
So I'm Erin Kobetz, and I'm from the University of Miami, and I actually represent both the university and the healthcare system because I'm the associate director of the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. Lucy, I kind of want your job. You may be living my dream. But I have my colleague and collaborator, Robin Backen here, and what's really interesting is that, like, together we cover a lot of what you do, but in very siloed aspects. And so in seeing your organizational chart and seeing what you're moving forward for your institution, I wrote Robin a note and I said, when you get back from sabbatical, we really need to think, at least institutionally, about where we can move things forward so that we can start working collaboratively with other anchor institutions, with other organizations, who are committed to this shared vision, I think, of social justice and economic opportunity. And so that's what I find really exciting. What's resonated with me is that on some level, our institution has been organizing appropriately, but that we have to foster the collaboration within to ensure that we have necessary capacity to be a true partner outside of the university and healthcare system.
That's a really great takeaway. And sabbatical sounds really nice.
Two more, so I'm gonna take one here and one here before we. Hi everyone, my name is Maria Carla Chico and represent Miami-Dade College. I lead special projects for the office of the college president, and just the fact that we're all here is a testament to everything that we can do together and the value of this initiative by the Health Foundation of South Florida. Thank you, Janine, Steve, and everyone who's made this gathering possible. And just by sitting next to Erin and getting to know her, we're already brainstorming ways to do things together between our institutions. But the thought that came to mind was I saw that there's been a big focus on small business opportunities, and I had the pleasure of meeting Pilar a few days ago, and we at the college are big supporters of elevating our small businesses. Our procurement department within HR, some of you probably had the opportunity to hear from Sheldon Edwards from our HR department this morning. We want to make sure we have those platforms in place so that we hire locally and we help our minority-owned businesses. But at the same time, I think there's also a big opportunity to help those families, those organizations, units in our community who are not even at the small business stage, who don't really have the training or the resources to start their own businesses, and at the individual, at the family level, help them with the education, the training, even access to healthcare and other benefits to make sure that we're getting at that level where escalation is possible. So if there are any thoughts from this group in moving forward as to how the college can help you get there, and we can collaborate, I would love to sit down with you and talk further, but it's something that I hope to hear more about as we move forward in this initiative.
Good afternoon. My name is Irma Becerra. I am the provost at St. Thomas University for the last 300 years. Prior to that, I was a vice president for engagement at FIU. I have been part of the Anchor Institution Task Force. It's a national task force of leaders, academic leaders, university presidents and provosts that really are pursuing this type of work. So Drexel and Rutgers and Penn and Case, they're all part of that network. So every time I go to the annual meeting in New York, I come back saying, boy, do we need this in Miami, but boy, where do we start? As you know, St. Thomas is in a community of Miami Gardens. It's one of the most violent cities in the United States, and it's a city that needs a lot of attention. So I hope that we can put a strategy together that really looks at the areas that need most attention. Liberty City, where I worked for a long time when I was spearheading an initiative at Miami Northwestern, Overtown, Miami Gardens, North Miami, Opelika. These areas need immediate attention. And I'm not going to say that Miami-Dade does not need attention, but there are pockets that need immediate attention. So my goal is that we somehow put a strategy together and a plan of action, so that we know how we are all going to participate, what resources do we need to bear, what resources do we need to find from our funding agencies that are here, so that we can have a 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and definitely achieve the goals that we have expressed here.
So I want us to now think a little bit about how Lucy talked a lot about how this is a business frame. It has to fit your institutional culture, fit your institutional priorities. And Ned, you talked a lot about community development, like we need a new system, period. Like what used to work yesterday doesn't necessarily work today. We gotta all change what we're doing. So where do folks in this room see entry points or opportunities to engage this work? Are there business pain points you're feeling from the economic distress that Ned showed us is happening in Miami? How is that affecting your business? What's the right role for your organization to play? Love to hear a few people reflect on where they would like to come into this work, and then we can talk about challenges next.
So Samira, do you mean like small business and entrepreneurship through the procurement process or HR hiring practices? Do you mean that? Okay.
So hi, I'm Emily Gresham. I work at FIU, think one of the entry points that made sense, and I'm actually really grateful to Lucy to say things like universities may not be very good at affordable housing because it was one of the biggest challenges in terms of how was I going to be able to fit FIU and what we do into affordable housing, knowing it was a huge problem. And so 2 years later, I still don't know. And so now I said, obviously, why I would know, right? So I think a really good foray for universities, because we focused on educational attainment for so long, right? That the next piece is economic opportunity. And certainly what I do in innovation and entrepreneurship and what that looks like in terms of inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's not just about small businesses, it's about digital literacy and how do we get folks the tools of accessible understanding of the tools that are free right now, like these huge platforms that you can make millions of dollars without actually buying a darn thing. And how do we begin to make those tools accessible to our community members? I think it's something that we as a university completely understand how to do, and I think it's a great next step for a lot of universities versus affordable housing. And transportation is the other one.
So how are people seeing entry points? Like, so what part can you say, oh, I'm really excited about that, and I see this for my organization or institution?
So I would volunteer in terms of an entry point. And my name is Sherry Kohler-Gervais, and I'm Vice President Economic Development and Urban Initiatives for the Miami-Dade Beacon Council. And so what we do is we work with businesses, and our goal is basically to help our businesses grow. And one of the areas that we can help our businesses grow is through connecting them and through procurement. And so with procurement being such a dominant part of the conversation, there's certainly an opportunity for us to take what we're doing and play a role in connecting the two. So our businesses, our small businesses, of which we have many, along with the anchor institutions, and facilitating in some way that connection. And that is working with the group. There are a number of entities that are here, there are a number of entities that are not here, that specialize in the technical assistance areas, which we talked about, that specialize in the access to capital in various ways, because certainly credit and capital and cash flow is a major component of the success. And so I would say that's an entry point where we would bring value.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah, so similarly, my name is Courtney Biscardi. I'm with the Urban League of Broward County. We are a nonprofit in this room, but I love Lucy's comments related to the role of the intermediary, because we are a larger nonprofit, I would say, in our community, and I think we could serve in that way to the very point you were just making. So we have an entrepreneurship center, we have access to a loan fund. So when I hear about challenges with access to capital and that there are opportunities on the horizon, but it takes business owners a long time to get paid for those projects, I absolutely see where we could fit in. You know, and our goal is social and economic equality for the community. So when we see folks on the ground who are hungry, you talked about the data related to the amount of people who aren't working, want to work, that's a reality. We talk to them, but they cannot get connected to all of the opportunities that are available. More recently, we've been talking to the school board of Broward County about their initiatives and their bid process, and how do we help build the capacity of the entrepreneurs that can reach that opportunity to unlock wealth. So for us, we absolutely think we could fit a void that many of you are articulating in terms of readying businesses, but the same is true on the workforce end and the jobs end. So we've partnered with local universities, Broward College, to develop training opportunities for high growth, high demand industries. So how do we ensure that we're readying the lower income people in community who are hungry to work for the workforce that's about to grow? So
We've heard from a couple of the intermediaries, and that's very helpful. It sounds like there are quite a few partners here ready and engaged. Maybe if we could switch to some of the anchors now to hear from you, and what parts of this continuum seem to be most advantageous, or areas that are most exciting for you.
Lisa Martinez, Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And I guess what my takeaway is that we can't reinvent the wheel all the time. There are a lot of ways in which we already collaborate in Miami-Dade County. We collaborate through the cohort of Academic Leaders Council and all the different higher education institutions and the school district working together with the Beacon Council on a lot of different initiatives. We collaborate on youth safety and the notion of anchor institutions, how we can be able to coordinate efforts on that across nonprofits. We collaborate on the idea of being able to address economic opportunities and being able to make sure that our procurement processes are more open to small businesses and have opening up the doors through the notion of addressing disparity, historic disparity. But how do we make sure that we are not just working in silos in those collaborative efforts too? Because I think what we can find is substantive examples of anchor institutions working consistently together, but in pockets instead of creating a comprehensive, holistic vision of how we can be able to work together and in turn be able to connect the dots and leveraging what we need to be able to accomplish, because it ends up being additional work when it could actually be more streamlined and more effective.
Hi, Robin Backman from the University of Miami, and I wanted to address that a little bit. I guess it's less a sort of leverage point than it is a challenge, because I find the same thing. And I should say, by the way, we're a university and we do work on affordable housing. We don't build affordable housing, we do what universities do. We provide the research, the data, the technological tools for grassroots organizations and policy people to do the work of building affordable housing. But I was really intrigued by the examples from Cleveland and Chicago about creating this space that does seem to be the binding agent, where all these institutions are brought together and there's cohesiveness and there's accountability. So it's not just up to the institutions themselves to figure out what the collaboration looks like, but there's an entity that has accountability, that's charged with being sure that the right kinds of collaborations happen and that they stick. And so I'm just curious in learning more about how you create that entity. It clearly involves government, right? Government has to be at the table in order to be a leader in that process. So I'd be curious to learn how we can replicate the Chicago and Cleveland models here.
Can I make a quick poll, because two people have said similar things, like how many people feel collaboration fatigue? They sit at too many tables and there isn't enough coordination across them. Okay, I just wanted to do that for the funders in the room. We usually invest in things like that to get a sense of.
But you also have to ask, though, not just fatigue around collaboration, but is the collaboration actually making a difference?
Right, that's
If it's making a difference,
It's like actually getting something.
it's making a difference.
Yeah, I don't think that we have like a network for anchor institutions type work. We have networks, but for different purposes. At least I don't feel like we have been able to accomplish that through the anchor work, through our network.
So Samir, maybe, I hate to jump ahead to your next question, but I'm sensitive to the time. But I think this is a good segue to, well, what should happen next and who should do it? So like, what are your ideas? You've heard some ideas that other pieces have moved forward with, but, and I'll just give you a hint to where the question is. The first part of the question is, what should happen next? And then the next part of the question is, who should do it? And by the way, there are mirrors in this room, so I'll just have some in my pocket if you need one. But seriously, so what are the tactics? And so let's just maybe just throw out some ideas, and if you could just take like 30 seconds to explain what you think should happen next, so that we can hear from as many people as possible.
And think about like, how do you get from theory to action? How do we get from talking about it to doing something about it?
All right, I'll be real fast, and it's very selfish, but Allegheny has been doing place-based giving in the Overtown area for the past 2 years. We're there for another 5 years, and economic development is very specifically one of the issues that we're looking at, and really looking at how to support small businesses, small minority-owned businesses in that community. And we're there, we're ready, and if there are any other anchor institutions or other partners who want to have that conversation, I think having a matching process for people to do what I just did and have people match up would be a great next step. Okay.
Steve's wanted to jump in for a while.
You know, in my opening remarks, I talked about a community of anchor institutions was coming about today. And right now, we're at the apex of forming that community. Every community in the old school world, which is where I'm from, has a library. And what are libraries? They're repositories. They're repositories in the new world, repositories of data. So we need repositories, people who work with data, people who warehouse data, and we need them in the anchor institution vocabulary. My vocabulary that comes to mind is an anchor institution scorecard, that we need to look at what the schools are doing, they can input what they're doing. Whether they're public schools or whether they're early childhood or wherever they are, universities and so forth. Jackson Hospital speaks so well of some of the things that they've done, and I'm sure we all have. So we need now to develop a data repository. I think there's some people here in the community from offices of engagement, from metropolitan centers, from places like that, that are very versed in doing that kind of work. And it might be a very good place to start. Certainly, a county government collects a lot of data and may have some extra bandwidth somewhere to participate. But I think we are looking for a data repository and data manager that can take that information, put it together, and have our own special South Florida anchor institution scorecard.
And is that information on like what they're doing in the community or what they're doing along this lens?
Well, I think there's all these things. I mean, the Chicago idea of a back room, and that becomes a inventory and repository of businesses that are down here in South Florida that the scorecard fills out as to what organizations have been engaged to help with minority businesses, matching them to anchor institutions. I think it's all part of the same bucket.
And I guess presumably the scorecard would be also about not only small businesses, but also about local hiring or hiring from disadvantaged communities, or I guess it could have a number of aspects.
I think you're going to have to make it sectioned for certain outcomes. But in the Drexel story about the benefits of engagement, about the benefits of improving the opportunity for the university to actually recruit better, to have a better environment. I think all these things are sectors that need to be tracked and basically talk about community improvement on a much larger scale.
So what else? What do we need to get to action? What do we need to get to action, especially for the anchors in this room? What's the
And we got a lot of hands up, so if you could be really quick.
Yeah.
Well,
I have one here first. Sorry. She hasn't spoken yet.
I already answered this question, but if
And
you
your name and
Sharice Grant from the Miami Foundation. The first thing is, I'm not sure who makes this determination, is this about sort of a project, the effect you have on community? Or is this about a movement, which is what I heard in the narrative of Drexel and Cleveland, and an imperative that happened over a long period of time with the determination of who the essential players were to start with and add on over time. And if it's about sort of the movement thing, then I'd imagine that Cleveland, Drexel, Chicago have both an understanding of who are the people you absolutely have to have at the table at the beginning and who needs to be the champion, and is there some trigger moment that actually created the momentum for the will for this to happen. So for me, understanding those things about how you get something started would be the most helpful.
I just asked Janice for permission. I just asked Janice, I'm going to ask Lucy and Ted to respond to that when we wrap up this part of the conversation, if you don't mind. What's the trigger? How do you get things started?
So, yeah, really quickly, speed round.
Go ahead, you get them done.
Well, I think, having recently visited Rutgers and Newark, you had a very, and answer to your question, you have a very determined mayor that said, we're going to make this a go. And he got together with the president of Rutgers and, the people that are on the table, and they set up a plan. And it was a 2020, by 2020. So I seriously feel that, I think all the anchors here understand what's in it for each one of us. Certainly the funding agencies, but we need a plan.
So are you also suggesting you need a high-level leader?
Yeah. We need a high-level leader.
Who thinks that that's true? Who thinks that you need a leader? Okay.
I think you need a champion.
A champion. So out of curiosity, who in Miami-Dade and then who in Broward? Well, I don't mean the person, but I mean the position. Like, who, or do you have ideas about who that is? Because in some cases we have the university presidents on board or the presidents of the hospital systems. So is that sufficient, or do you think it needs to have a different level of leadership?
I think it almost has to be outside, like speaking about the University of Miami, it would be, and Robin, you can chime in if you don't agree, like I feel like it has to be someone outside of our institution who can bring other people to the table, including those who might be perceived in the market of healthcare, for example, as competitors. You need someone who can bring people together with a shared focus and move things forward. Now, I just put my cell phone down for you because the School of Medicine is located in Overtown, and Robin and my team are working there from different angles, and there's no reason why we can't partner up and maximize opportunity and impact. But I think if you're talking about really driving this process forward, at least from our institution, it needs to be somebody who's somewhat neutral and organizing us around a shared purpose. And I agree, it's not about the moment, it's about a movement.
Okay, really quickly. Okay, so Mike, then.
So I'm going to do a commercial for the Beacon Council. Listen, so first of all, let me just tell you a little bit more about myself, and I'll get this in 30 seconds. I came here 6 months ago from Michigan. Michigan was at the lowest point of all states in the United States. I was a part of Governor Snyder's team, and we did exactly what you're talking about. We put together a $120 million fund to raise capital to seed small businesses. It's called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. Google it, and you'll see it was a Michigan innovation that became a national tool for how to raise capital to help small businesses sustain themselves when they couldn't find debt capital. State Small Business Credit Initiative. Number 2, we launched an initiative called Community Ventures that was designed to get at people who were impoverished. It started because we had too many communities that were in crime and violence was rampant. Saginaw, Flint, Pontiac, Detroit. We launched Community Ventures over about a 3.5-year period. We placed more than 5,000 people, 20% of whom were ex-offenders. And those were in sustainable jobs that paid a living wage. These were not low-level jobs. Sustainable jobs, paid a living wage. And the program had a 20-month ROI. In other words, the state of Michigan invested $10 million a year, and 20 months later, the state of Michigan recovered its investment, and it's all thoroughly documented and auditable. The last thing that I'll mention, this idea of the anchor institution, I've talked to Steve and Janice about it a little bit. I've had direct experience doing that. Again, a program we call Business Connect in Michigan, Pure Michigan Business Connect. Over a 4-year period, we facilitated $3.5 billion of B2B activity. It wasn't just anchor institutions like all of you, it included private companies as well. But it's exactly the same concept. It absolutely works, so please get behind it through your institutions. So when it comes to the B2B, helping people find jobs and raising capital to support small businesses, that's part of the reason I arrived in Miami from Michigan. It's because through that process, they were looking for an economic development professional that thought differently, that understood that it wasn't about giving away all your valuable tax dollars to business after business and chasing companies to relocate them from one community to another. It's more than that. It's all the stuff you're talking about today, so I thought I'd get my shameless commercial.
So just to follow up on that, so Mike, to respond to some of the other concerns, the Beacon Council is interested in Miami Gardens and Opelika and places like that. Okay, all right.
Miami Gardens has become our targeted location for demonstrating that you can, in fact, have an impact in these economically distressed communities. So our Urban Initiative Task Force, we have identified Miami Gardens and we're actively working there right now. We're actively working in Opelika and throughout the entire county.
Okay, so we have leadership. It sounds like there's leadership, and obviously this is for a person like myself who's been around for a while. This sounds like a very different Beacon Council than what I'm accustomed to.
Todd knows my background too. And he knows that within the International Economic Development Council, our professional association, I led an effort to really instill equity in the work that we do in economic development. For a 2.5-year period, I chaired the International Economic Development Council's Equity Committee. And we really pushed a lot of these same items that we're talking about.
Yeah, so that is very true. Mike has been a leader on the national stage on that. So Broward, so let's not forget Broward County. Who are the leaders? Is there you just heard Mike's passion. Is there someone who's focused in Broward, or how would you think about leadership?
Yes, absolutely. Besides just talking about leadership, first I'm Farzana Hafizullah from Nova Southeastern University. I just wanted to get back to the data and the metrics that Michael mentioned in the very beginning. That really helps us to define the process, to highlight truly the best practices, and to build the infrastructure for organizations and institutions to really embrace the anchor mission and vision. There are a lot of organizations that actually are anchor institutions. I don't know that they are. So an institutional self-study that goes along with the scorecard that you mentioned, Stephen, would really help to evoke change in a lot of the institutions. We're very involved now as the 8th MD school in the state of Florida. But we are focusing on population health and reaching communities who are sort of not just underserved, but where there's inertia, with culturally appropriate materials, etc. And as we're doing that, we're building out pipelines to make sure that we incorporate those communities into our academic environment. And in that sense, that is, definitely pursuing a part of the anchor mission and vision. What we'd like to have is a dashboard that displays these best practices and will be a centralized location, as you mentioned, the library, so that we can not only stay on the same page, but we can refine our approach as we see the changes and the trends of data at the same time. So it becomes a very intuitive approach. Data speaks for itself, and the data will drive change. But we know that our successes is born from the success of our community. So coming together here at the table, I think, is the first step. But now to organize, build that infrastructure, and centralize the process. And as a university, Nova Southeastern University, though we've not been designated as an anchor institution, perhaps we've certainly been promoting that mission and vision for a very long time. And as a new medical school, we're certainly in line with that. We'd love to work together.
So we have run out of time.
I do want just Jasmine, because I know Broward Health.
But one twist to that, not a twist, just another caveat to look at. And Broward has been very successful. We have all the players at the table. But you gotta understand, and everybody's gotta be on the same page. The community that we're impacting will tell us and define for us how they want to be impacted. It's not going to be our agenda. It's going to be what's in the best interest of that community and the anchoring institution.
Yes.
I don't know what I just want to, I think I know what you mean by that, but do you mean community engagement? I mean, we're talking about like procurement strategies or
For example,
HR.
some of the things that have gone on have impacted communities very, very significantly. To the fact that tension that someone, I think the Cleveland Ted talked about is very hot right about now in Broward, throughout the entire Broward. So we cannot be in the business if we're going to remain a viable supporter and partner. We cannot be in the business of alienating those that we so-called say we want to lift and help. The voice of the community has to be there.
So I want to end on that note, because we ended on actually a hard note, where people were being honest about the challenges they're facing in their communities. What brought me and Todd down here from Atlanta is we couldn't believe that Janice and Inez were able to assemble a room of this caliber and this number of institutions and this number of cross-sectoral partners who said, we want to do something different. We know that our community is a high-need community. The working poor numbers were just staggering. And at least for me, I thought that those were some really staggering numbers. The concentrations of poverty, and that those maps haven't changed in 10 plus years, 17 years, it's staggering. And I know it's very hard to share in a room of this size with a video rolling. So I want to remind everyone that you have some really engaged funders in this room, and you need to tell them what you need to make you move from talking about this work to doing this work. What scares you? Who do they have to talk to at the tops of your institutions to help you move your institution? And really focus on Lucy's challenge of what fits with your institution's mission and culture, and what can you bring? What are you bringing to the table that's gonna lift all the communities? So on that note, Todd, I don't know if you want to say anything else to wrap that up.
No, I'll just maybe speak a little personally, and that has to do with, I went to Central High School. I grew up in Liberty City, so something's got to change. I mean, that number was from a personal standpoint, and when we talk about communities, I think sometimes we just don't talk about that individual and that individual and that individual and that individual, each of those units make up the community. I'm a part of that community. I came from that community. We're all a part of the community. And I think at the Fed, we certainly have the data to support that it's in the best interest economically of this community in order for us to kind of make these things move. I think Mike's work on the national level has also proven that to be true. And I think now it's about time to roll up the sleeves and to take that word anchor very literally. University of Miami isn't going anywhere, and you certainly don't want to be Penn and have graduates, your graduation ceremony ruined. And I mean, that's just one emblematic of one small thing, but rather than look at it as a negative, I think of it as a positive. Let's think about the opportunities that so many people can have and that so many people need. And I think if we focus on that and take that very seriously, and as we are driving down the street or walking down and we see people who need help, here are opportunities for us to take that. So as we're having this conversation about anchor institutions and processes, et cetera, I think we can't forget the people. And so I just want to encourage you to kind of focus on that. So thank you for your time, and I know at the Federal Reserve we're looking forward to helping to
Don't
your next
stand up yet. I promise we'll get you out of here in 5 minutes. Thank you, Todd and Samira, for facilitating the conversation. Ines and I will do a bit of wrap up, just sharing some of the opportunities that have come about in the past few months, and I know that Steve wanted to also do some farewell remarks. One of the things that comes to mind that, as I was hearing all the thoughts and the discussion was that even though we have a wealth of information that's coming out of all these different communities and networks and so forth, and we can certainly tap into that experience, lessons learned, and so forth. We need to pretty much design our own path here in our local community because we know we are distinct or special, but we have a lot of assets, and I'm just blown away really by the conversation today and just the fact that we have so many anchor institutions and other community leaders at the table, bank, finance, which we didn't get to hear, but there's a lot of opportunities for the funders to come together, and then obviously we started this journey at the foundation because there was a call to action made at the national level by Robert Wood Johnson, just a small foundation out there, that said, healthcare and community development should work together. And that conversation actually started in a meeting at our offices when, Karen, so it's really about timing, and that's kind of what I was thinking. 15 years ago you had that, but the timing was not right. Now we have a number of community champions in all these different sectors. So I'm going to turn it over to Ines before then we make a big announcement.
Samira was onto something when she said there's no such thing as a free lunch. That's the reason why you've been invited here today. It is that we are going to ask you something. So I really thought we were going to be in a position of trying to convince you, and I'm pleasantly surprised that there's an appetite to do this work. And I think we all recognize our individual value. We've talked about that essentially. So I like to talk in analogies, and the analogy pretty much is, if I had 100 pennies that were dropped on the floor, most likely, most of us would have bent down, picked them up, right? It's too much effort, even though they have value. But if I were to drop $1, you most likely would bend over and pick it up. So I guess the question, and I guess the theme that I'm hearing is, how can we take all the opportunities, aggregate them, whether it's the businesses or the anchors, into the dollar, so that we can make the, that theory to action. And there lies, the beginning, hopefully, of building a table and our announcement, but ask. It's not just an announcement, it's an ask.
It's an ask. And just so you have a sense of where we are now, we are in the process of thinking about what is the infrastructure that we need at the local level to move this forward. We do not want this to be just another convening, another meeting where you come and we share a bunch of great ideas and then nothing comes out of it. I'm going to be accountable to myself, but I'm accountable to my board of directors and obviously our, my president and so forth to make something out of this happen. And I think that it's well worth the time and effort that we've been putting into this. So we have about $500,000 committed
to moving this forward. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't, because what we're talking about here is a lot of different opportunities that we need to figure out how to connect the dots. But we do need to start with the local infrastructure and manpower.
Or woman power.
Or woman power. Okay, but it's not me. But and so we need, staff that will help move this forward to make the connections, build a platform. There's a whole host of different activities that we have thought about. Learning journeys, we've heard of opportunities to go and visit other communities, to hear from peers at the national level. I think that it's been wonderful to have, Lucinda, thank you again so much for coming. But I'm sure it's better from, compared to where you're coming from. And we had a wonderful morning workshop that was facilitated by Justine and Danny, so thank you so much, where that conversation was really focused on the procurement and hiring and finding solutions. So I want you to know that there'll be some post-conversation. Definitely expect that via email so that there are concrete steps on how we move forward. Anything that I failed to mention?
I just want to make sure everybody understood. We're going to be funding, and I just want to make sure that you will stay at the table. So if we build the table, I guess the question is, will you stay committed to being at the table to help us through this initiative? Because it's not really, up till now, Denise has been carrying the water, so we need to carry it together. Yes? I almost want to make sure you can't.
We were here at the door.
So fully committed. Fully committed. Okay, so I'll be fully committed. All right, well, thank you.
Just as a little dot on the end of the sentence, there's an expression I heard the other day called active applause. And that is when people have really worked hard and really are committed and dedicated to something. And you've heard from two people right there at the door that certainly deserve active applause. So active applause. Book that's been out there for a while, and it's something that now becomes part of my institutional conversation. It's called Start With Why. Yeah. That's what we had today. We started with why. Why are we here? In the golden circle, after why comes how. Yeah. And then what are we going to accomplish? So we have why, how, and what. So we've crossed the line of why, and we're into how. Huh?
We've begun the what and the how.
And we've begun the how and the what. So thank you all.